All right, welcome everybody. We're so happy that so many of you could join today for our side session in the OECD Forum on due diligence in the garment and footwear sector. And before we dive right into the topic of stakeholder engagement further down the lower tiers of the textile supply chain in the context of Vietnam, I would quickly just remind you of some housekeeping rules, right? So by default, all you as participants are muted. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we will answer those questions at the end of the session afterwards, right? We will also make a recording of the video, but also we'll share the slides with you afterwards. So there you will also get the chance to have a second look. And during the presentation, there will also be short polls. So we will ask you some questions and we would like you to answer them. Now, let's introduce us. So our project is a multi-stakeholder initiative working on digital stakeholder engagement and capacity building in the deeper supply chain in Vietnam. And it consists of Natalie Birke from Deuter, Hellwig from ORTOVOX, Silke Kabagambe from CARE, me, Joshua, co-founder from Atlat, and Dinh and Quan from CDI, the Center for Development and Integration in Vietnam. Now I will hand over to Natalie, who will introduce the project from a other perspective.
Thank you, Joshua, and a warm welcome also from my side. I'm Natalie Birke, CSR Manager at Deuter, and I'm pleased to introduce our multi-stakeholder project to you today. It's a project aimed to empower workers through training and access to effective grievance mechanisms in the lower tiers of Deuter's and ORTOVOX supply chain. This includes both factory internal grievance mechanisms as well as the implementation of a factory independent complaint channel. The project builds on a cooperation between Deuter and the software provider Atlat that began in 2020. Atlat provides such a factory-independent digital grievance mechanism that allows workers to submit complaints anonymously and directly to brands via chat, providing workers a safe alternative to internal grievance structures. And you will also learn more about the tool and how it works later in the presentation. Deuter served Atlat as an implementation partner in the development process of their grievance tool, and in 2022, a user research study and a first pilot was conducted in Deuter factories. What we've learned from this pilot is the importance of ensuring that workers and managers understand the purpose of the Atlat grievance tool and its operation, and also that they build trust in the system. So training is essential. Also, we wanted to ensure that there are factory internal grievance structures in place before implementing the Atlat tool. And we also wanted to strengthen the enabling conditions that are necessary for grievance mechanisms to function effectively, such as empowering workers to understand their rights and confidently voice their concerns, sensitizing management to the importance of grievance mechanisms, and building the capacity to establish and handle grievance processes responsibly, and fostering constructive social dialogue at the factory level. This shaped the core of the project and led us to place a strong emphasis on capacity building and training for both workers and managers in the factories. With the final project, we applied for the Ideas competition of the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles. Being selected for funding then resulted in a public-private partnership, and so we were able to implement the project in a total of 9 factories of Deuter and ORTOVOX. Among these were 8 fabric and material suppliers and 1 yarn supplier in Vietnam, so the project was implemented beyond Tier 1 in the deeper levels of the supply chain. The funding covered the costs for the implementation of the comprehensive training programs, and the costs for the Atlat tool were taken on by the brands. A decisive factor for the project's success was its multi-stakeholder approach. Partnering with ORTOVOX allowed us to build on overlapping supply chains, increasing leverage, and fostering a strong collaboration. Then the project was further strengthened by the involvement of the NGO CARE Germany, providing consulting support by means of their deep expertise in labor rights in Southeast Asia and also in project management. Then there is Atlat as the service provider for the digital grievance mechanism and survey tools, as well as the Center for Development and Integration in Vietnam, which developed culturally sensitive, practice-oriented trainings in all participating factories. At an overarching level, the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles provided funding and supported the formal project management. Throughout the entire project phase, we held bi-weekly fix meetings together with all project partners. These regular exchanges were crucial to closely monitor progress, address challenges early on, and also to ensure alignment across all stakeholders. Overall, and I think I speak for everyone when I say that it was an excellent, trust-based, and highly committed cooperation. The project ran from April 2024 until June 2025, so it's already completed, but both Deuter and ORTOVOX have committed to continue their collaboration with Atlat, so the external grievance channel will remain active in the factories for at least 1 more year, and we've also committed to follow up with the factories within that timeframe. In the remainder of this presentation, we will share how the project was implemented in practice, hear from the individual project partners, and highlight key learnings, outcomes, and also feedback from the factories themselves. And with that, I'm pleased to hand over to Silke from CARE.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Yeah, it was mentioned CARE had a consulting role, and we supported this project particularly during the design phase, and then later in a backstopping role. The CARE team, so that also includes our colleagues from CARE Vietnam, contributed a focus on more vulnerable workers, as well as on gender and do no harm aspects. And our motivation to join this initiative was really based on our understanding that this is a very complex context and has multiple layers of social and economic development. So we believe that complementary perspectives and experiences from both the private sector and civil society were really essential. Yeah, looking back, I think for me it was really a great learning experience, and the project benefited from this joint collaboration. I want to mention that I found it very crucial that from the very beginning, all the partners showed strong interest in each other's perspectives and expertise. And it was really crucial that our exchanges and discussions were characterized by openness and also mutual appreciation. Yeah, would we join such an initiative again? So our answer is definitely yes, absolutely. We do really believe, and we see in this example that collaboration of the different sector stakeholders really add value to sustainable programming and yeah, higher impact creation. So as mentioned earlier, the CARE team was mainly involved in the early stages during implementation phase. The local partner organization CDI took on this role and added then also a very significant value through the local expertise and the understanding of gender concepts and perceptions within the specific factory context. And yeah, I'm very happy to now hand over to CDI colleagues to share more about the actual project implementation.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. My name is Quan, and I'm the project officer / trainer at the Center for Development and Integration. We are responsible for the capacity building aspect of this project, and today I'll be giving a presentation on the capacity strengthening in Vietnam's textile and garment industry and how specifically the project and capacity building activities were implemented at the local level at these factories. Next slide, please. I will give a brief introduction about CDI. We are a Vietnamese science and technology organization promoting inclusive socioeconomic development and good governance with a focus on vulnerable groups. And some of the key interventions that we do in our organization includes research, survey, monitoring and identify the risk of working conditions and labor rights. We build capacities for all stakeholders in the supply chain. We promote social dialogue, grievance mechanism, and legal aid by also improving workers' living conditions. We also focus on fostering multi-stakeholder collaboration and engagement, and national and regional networking as well. Next slide, please. I will provide a little bit of the context and some of the key interventions that we do in this project. Some of the challenges among the lower tier suppliers include, comparing to the first tier factories and suppliers, lower tier factories face significant resource and capacity constraints, such as limited infrastructure and workplace utilities. Occupational health safety conditions remain very basic, and some of the factories are very poor. Lower awareness of national labor laws and international labor standards. They do have weak or underdeveloped management and compliance systems, and that results in lower quality working conditions and workplace environments. Some of the key interventions that we have implemented in the entirety of this project include raising awareness on labor rights and compliance topics. We develop and strengthen international grievance mechanisms of these factories. We introduced and promoted the external grievance tools and channels. We enhanced social dialogue between workers and managers in these suppliers, and we provided training and awareness on gender equity and prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. Next slide, please. And now I will provide a little bit of the training program structure and overview. We focus on the enhanced relationship between brand and suppliers and manufacturers, improve knowledge and skills of management workers, help factory to better comply to Vietnam labor regulation and code of conduct, also improving the relationship between factory management and workers, also to address workers' increase in complaints in a better manner, also improve the competitiveness and position of the factory in the entire supply chain. Yes. Here is the process of the program. We go from the baseline assessment survey, and then we have the training 1 and 2, which were implemented together in the topics of internal grievance mechanism. And then we move on to the topic of training 2, which is the communication and social dialogue. After that, we have training 3, which is after we go over the internal grievance mechanism, we'll have to introduce to all the factories the external grievance mechanism, its tools, and also the ADLAT tool as well. Training 4, we have 2 topics. It's Vietnam labor regulation, and then we move on to prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace. Training 5 is a follow-up of training 1 and 2. The topic will be repeated, but in an advanced way. Communication skills in the workplace, social dialogues. And training 6 is a follow-up on training 3. We follow up on knowledge on external grievance mechanism and ADLAT, and we have a closing session with the factory management to wrap up the entire training series. And then we conducted the inline evaluation, and we do a follow-up assessment report to all factories to see how the results, are in after we have complemented the entire training series. Next, please. I will very briefly talk about each content of each training, and I will make it as short as possible. So the first training is about strengthening factories' internal grievance mechanisms. We assess the current factory practices and improvement of internal grievance mechanism. We identify the strengths and weakness, limitations of existing mechanisms that they do have at their factories, and we review whether or not these channels and mechanisms are in place and functioning effectively. We also implement activities to improve these factory internal grievance channels and mechanisms and communication systems. Next slide, please. Training 2, we focus on communication, social dialogue in the workplace. We have capacity building activities for all parties and stakeholders involved in this training. We deliver these training knowledge separately for managers and workers. We equipped each group with the necessary skills for constructive and respectful dialogue, and we strengthen communication, listening, and problem-solving skills. And at the end, we have a very important joint dialogue session where we provided a safe space and we facilitated a structured dialogue between workers and factory managers. And then the workers will actually share their workplace concerns and issues in an appropriate manner. And then the managers, both in the middle and senior level of the factory, provide immediate responses and sometimes even resolutions to these issues and concerns that they were now aware. Next slide, please. And here are some of the photos of training 2. Training 3, we moved on to the role of external grievance mechanism and introduction of the ADLAT tool. We introduced the very importance of external grievance channels. We provided additional independent channels for workers to be now aware and utilize. And also we sort of introduced these channels' benefits and limitation outside of the factory, how to use them, and what does it mean when it comes to confidentiality, neutrality, and accessibility. And we provided guidance on when external mechanisms should be used. And then we introduced to the entire factory, the entire training participants, to the ADLAT tool. We provided the overview of the platform, its purpose, functionality, and its role in resolving workers' concern. And here are some of the posters that we designed on the training 3. Training 4, we moved on to the two main contents: international labor standards, where we introduced 8 international labor standards to all managers and workers, and we aligned them with the Vietnamese labor laws and how, its compatibility to Vietnamese labor laws. And then we provided a brief session on prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace to help workers and managers understand workplace sexual harassment, its definitions and behaviors, its types and forms, also how impactful could it be, and what are the consequences for workers and managers and the entire business will be if such behaviors exist in the factory. And we provided the roles and responsibilities for all stakeholders involved in this process. Training 5, please. And then we did a short training on follow-up on internal grievance mechanism and social dialogue in the workplace. We enhanced the existing knowledge that we provided previously in the training 1 and 2 in communication and dialogue skills, and we utilized internal grievance channels, and we follow up on these workers' concerns that were listed out in training 1 and 2 in the previous joint dialogue session with a new joint dialogue session in training 5. So the workers and managers will have a chance to have a joint dialogue twice if they participated in training 2 and training 5. Next, please. And training, lastly, is training 6. We did a follow-up on external grievance mechanisms and updated the ADLAT tool. We revisited the knowledge on external grievance mechanism, and we reintroduced the ADLAT tool for everyone to have a refreshed memory and knowledge on the tool and how to use it. Also introduced its newer version, more updated, less errors and bugs. Yeah, and that is the entire training series with 6 trainings. And now I'll move back to our colleague Joshua. Thank you. Oh, sorry, we have impacts. Lastly, we have impacts before the lessons learned, so I will finish this part. Can you have the next slide? Some of the key impacts and results that we have been able to achieve include 9 factories in the southern Vietnam region participated in this training program, and in totality there are 55 trainings conducted. We had 18 joint social dialogue sessions held between factory managers and workers, and 2 of the factories have actually formally integrated grievance procedures into their internal labor policies. And the factories participated in this project demonstrated strengthened commitment to systematic grievance handling and worker voice. Yeah. I will not read all of this, but some of the factories' feedback I have included in this presentation include, I will summarize maybe 1 or 2. From the management, the training program helps the factory have a more systematic view of all problems, which before we only solve case by case. From there, we have solutions to solve systematically and thoroughly. And this is from managers in one of the factories. From the workers, one of them stated that, in the final training, most of the participating workers share that they would introduce ATLAT to other colleagues in their department, which is very good news. Next. Thank you. And now Joshua will continue with the data from ATLAT.
So thanks so much, Quan. Let me give you a few insights from the data perspective. First of all, for our digital stakeholder engagement system, really the heart of our system are the grievances. And we provide, on the one hand side, different low threshold channels for workers to submit the grievances. And on the other hand side, the platform for the brands to create CAPs, corrective action plans, get reports, get guidance, but also collaborate and communicate with all the stakeholders involved. So how does this work? Ideally, a worker can scan QR codes, either from flyers or poster, and then either receive more information through videos, for example, or FAQ, or choose their complaint channel, right? And once the grievance is then submitted, there will be a notification for the brand, a push notification, so they know there's a new grievance. Now to the data part. So in this project, we learned, as you just heard, the extensive training, that there's a lot of planning also going in the training. And in the baseline assessment at the beginning of the project, we had really a high participation rates, and this enabled a really tailored approach to the trainings for each factory's needs. And in this project, we also learned how much information flows in the coordination of the trainings. So we basically co-designed a feature to document trainings and improve the audit assurance, the quality assurance, and gather comparable data to also reduce the email overflow. Then on the follow-up assessment, we also had a really high participation rate in the gathering of the follow-up assessments of all the information that was shared in the training. But not only that, also the follow-up assessment showed that a really high percentage of people, 90%, said they know how to use the backup mechanism, the ATLAT external grievance mechanism, if they had a complaint that they would not wish to address internally or internally didn't function. So besides this really successful output, we also have a different funnel of data that is not only grievances. So from the high number of how often the QR codes were scanned, how often people looked at the frequently asked questions, we had also a high number of test complaints that were submitted during the training days, but also real complaints submitted in this external system only. In our ATLAT system were 4. But there were also complaints that were aborted, right? This is not in the first step, trying it out, and not on the training days, but during the process of submitting the complaint, the process was also aborted sometime. In 3 cases, actually. And now to the total number of grievances. So we have different categories that these backup mechanism grievances, these ATLAT grievances, were referring to: payment, working hours, but also labor rights issues, right? And with these grievances, we had also the problem that the complainant wasn't reachable for the clarification. Technically, the ATLAT system allows to easily reach the complainant, but they weren't up for clarification questions. So we were also wondering what might be the issue of the low number of complaints in the backup system, but also why there was so little participation in the follow-up questions. So from the low amount of complaints, there are several possible issues. But to be honest, looking at the results, especially from the follow-up survey as well, it has to be factory specific. So either there are no issues to complain about, or also the internal system really improved, which is most likely. And if we have a look at the reachability, per se, I wouldn't say that you have to say this is a failure of the complaint system, that they weren't reachable for follow-up questions. It can also be interpreted as a byproduct of other positive factors. For example, the brands were very eager with the push notification of the new complaints to contact the factories immediately, and maybe the issues were already solved on site, or through the trainings of social dialogue, maybe just also the issues were otherwise solved. But we also created some technical measures to improve these issues. So in the course of the project, we also created a new feature to see when and if the complainant has opened the complaint, like you can see on such screenshot. And we also added an additional channel, which is really important for Vietnam, and this is Yalo. Now, this is it from my side, and I will quickly share a video with you, which will show a different perspective on the topic from a factory point of view.
Sau cuộc họp tại Dinh nói chung mình có cái vấn đề là rất là thoải mái. Ví dụ mình có vấn đề thắc mắc để lên làm sếp, ví dụ là cấp dưới hay cấp trên thì nó cũng giống như người trong nhà lúc trước thì không có, lúc trước không được giải quyết, bây giờ rất là thoải mái. Rất là thoải mái. Tại Dinh thì nói chung có cải thiện về cái số ăn. Lúc trước cái nhà ăn đó để ai ăn chỗ nào cũng được, sau này sau cuộc họp với là sếp tổ chức sắp xếp cho chỗ ăn chỗ ở cho mình cho nó đúng ngay ngắn đúng vị trí. Các bạn ăn được, có bạn ăn đầy đủ. Bạn để đầy đủ.
Nếu như mà không được giải quyết thỏa đáng thì có thể tiếp cận với sự chịu để giải đáp. Còn ngoài ra bên công ty còn có một số kênh như là công đoàn để hỗ trợ giải quyết quyền cho công nhân, nên là em thấy những kênh rất là hay. Và sau cái buổi tập huấn này thì từ tập huấn trước đó em biết thêm một kênh hỗ trợ cho người lao động là ATLAS. Hiện tại thì cái kênh ATLAS đó thì được ẩn danh để làm cho là mọi người có thể tự tin trình bày ý kiến của mình, là những cái khó khăn vướng mắc của mà nhà máy không giải quyết. Nhưng mà thực sự là nhà máy bây giờ mình ưu tiên cái kênh giải quyết nội bộ trước. Nhưng mà mình công nhân cảm thấy không được nữa thì mình sử dụng cái kênh ngoài.
Trong cái chương trình khi mà quyết định người ta có không?
Dạ, có người có cải thiện.
Already has get this experience in using the hotline.
Hầu như là đa số là
we want to look good to our customers at all times, including the sustainability issue as well. But at the end of the day, what is this for? It's not just for this; it's for us as well. It's not just for our customers. So, which means that we take this opportunity to make us change ourselves. That's more important. In the past, people were very passive. If the management says so, okay, we paint the walls. But now, because after the education sessions, I think that things have changed. Of course, we made some other efforts as well, which means that it used to be one-sided communications and actions, but now it has become like what should I say, the unilateral actions from the top management and also the people working on the floor. They all make suggestions and improvement. That's the most positive effect that we can have. Because if it's always one-sided, it never works in terms of sustainability.
Things we can convey to whom. For example, for leader, what problem we convey to leader, what problem we can reach further, and then each department, each person has the right to solve that kind of problem. You get from workers, and then disseminate like that, and then expect it by more efficient, things like that. And then we also try to make it the like system, like the policy for the conveying. It's important because just to not have it because as I understand well, when you have a very small like question in your head and you cannot be answered, it can cause a big problem later, and then if you don't approach well with that, it can so that's why we try to make people feel like we understand the environment that they work, they feel safe, they feel like they are protected. So it's just like that, they feel happy to look and then to stay with the longer. We also have to change in our process. Like, for example, before we general is what if you just talk who have any opinion, who would like to serve. But after training, we don't want to do the same process. We also talk in the meeting, do you have any opinion? But after that, we also make some app secretly. If you don't want to talk in front of many people, you just send a yellow director number, telephone. If you want to contact directly, if you want to contact with someone who believe human resources. So at the time we don't really need them to talk in the only the communication. communication in the front of the many people. Yeah. We had many ways for them to solve their idea.
Do you think the workers are more easy now to share the idea?
Yeah. Yes, of course. They have many ways. Yeah. They not only so if we have to talk with the human resources. Any message, even don't have the name, just show it problem first. Investigate first. Is this correct? Not correct. Nói chuyện thôi, mà sau khi tập huấn thì cái vấn đề nó rất là chuyên nghiệp, với nói chuyện đến về cái nhận thức và cả cái cách mà người ta truyền đạt cái thông tin mà người ta muốn đưa tới cho bộ phận quản lý cũng tốt hơn, và bộ phận quản lý tiếp nhận và giải quyết cũng theo một cái lộ trình mà làm cho người ta cảm thấy thoải mái hơn, giống như là đáp ứng được cái mong muốn của người lao động. Và những cái thông tin mà họ muốn nói thì giống như lúc trước đây chỉ là một câu chuyện, thì bây giờ nó lại là một cái gì đó vấn đề mà nó mang một tính chất nó rất là chuyên nghiệp, giống như việc mình được nói mà mình được giải quyết, họ hiểu cái vấn đề, nhận thức được như vậy. Trong cái trả lời cái link hôm trước em có nói là sẽ muốn là có những cái đợt tập huấn lại như vậy. Tại vì không nghĩa là mang cái nội dung tương tự nữa, mà mang cái nội dung, tại vì thường là sẽ có nhiều cái kiến thức mới nó update lên mà, thì là cho một số người, ví dụ như là lúc trước họ đã làm việc nhưng mà họ nghĩ là những người mới vào, là cập nhật lại cho những người mới, và đôi khi là ấy bổ sung thêm kiến thức cho những người cũ nữa. Tại vì cái chương trình đào tạo của họ thì nó sẽ rất là rộng, giống như lúc cái chị An giới thiệu em, mà nó có rất là nhiều chuyên đề chứ không phải là riêng về cái việc nhận thức đối thoại như việc rồi.
Cái là công ty mình có những cái audit hay là có những cái đối tác nào đến đây training giống như vậy?
Chưa.
This is the first time.
Yeah.
So here we offered a different perspective from factory visit, and this is, I think, also the perspective, the story that the data cannot tell, right? Very important to say also here that, of course, the participation was voluntary, right? And now, without further ado, this from Quan.
Thank you, Joshua, and I will introduce a little bit about what we have learned, the lessons that we have learned from the implementation of this project from a NGO's perspective. We realized that proactive brand engagement is very critical when we implement something like this, because strong impact is achieved when brands take the initiative to collaborate with NGOs and lower tier suppliers. NGO partnerships help bridge capacity gaps through technical and expertise, training, and felicitation. If we have proactive brand involvement, we accelerate the alignment with labor standards and responsible practices for lower tier suppliers. And supporting lower tier suppliers strengthen the entire supply chain, and not just the factories themselves, but the entire supply chain as well. Lower tier suppliers are often the most vulnerable to labor and human rights risk, and capacity gaps at lower tiers actually directly affect overall supply chain performance and compliance. Targeted support and resources from brand is very vital to improve consistency and quality across the entire supply chain. Can I have next slide, please? Third, workers' voice have to be central to sustainability efforts. Meaningful workers' participation is essential for identifying real workplace issues. Direct brand worker communication channels, as presented, for example, Atlas tool, enable workers to safely raise concerns. Listening to workers provide brands with valuable ground-level insights that these audits alone cannot capture. And fourth, sustainability requires long-term commitment. Grievance mechanisms and dialogue initiatives must be sustained over time to create tangible impacts. Consistent engagement builds trust between workers, factories, and brands. Long-term commitment leads to more effective grievance resolution and continuous improvement. Next slide, please. And lastly, NGOs are bridge actors in supply chain governance. NGOs like us, we play a critical role as neutral implementation partners, and we provide technical expertise and practical on-the-ground support. We enjoy a little bit of a higher credibility and trust with workers compared to brands at factory management. We act as a neutral conveyors, facilitating dialogue between stakeholders with historically unequal or might be adversarial relationships. Next slide, please. We move on to some of the recommendations that we make from an NGO perspective. First, we strengthen brand NGO supplier partnerships. encourage brands to proactively collaborate with NGOs and lower tier suppliers, such as this project. We should leverage NGO expertise to design and implement capacity building programs like this one, and we institutionalize multi-stakeholder partnerships in supply chain strategies. Secondly, we should prioritize capacity building for lower tier suppliers. We allocating dedicated resources to support lower tier factories, provide trainings, tools, and technical guidance on labor standards and compliance, integrate lower tier engagement into responsible sourcing frameworks, and third, institutionalize worker voice mechanisms, which has been emphasized its essentiality. Establish and sustain safe, accessible worker feedback channels, expand and sustain direct communication platforms between workers and brands, for example, the Atlas tool, when ensuring worker input informs factory and brand decision-making process. The next slide, please. Fourth, sustain grievance and social dialogue initiatives. We should move beyond pilot activities toward long-term implementation. We should embed the grievance and dialogue practices into factory systems and policies, so not just capacity building activities, but also into their policies as well. And we should monitor progress and continuously improve resolution effectiveness. And again, leverage NGOs as neutral bridge actors, engage NGOs as trusted facilitators of worker management and brand dialogue, utilize NGOs to convene stakeholders and mediate sensitive issues, and strengthen transparency, trust, and accountability across the supply chain. Yes. And that would be the end of my presentation with lessons learned from an NGO. And now I will invite my colleague, Natalie, for the next part.
Thank you, Quan. From the brand's perspective, I'd also like to share some key project learnings, starting with 2 learnings on partnership and commitment. So first of all, we're equally convinced of the multi-stakeholder approach. From our experience, collaborating with NGOs and technical service providers sets important impulses that challenge your thinking, offer practical solutions, and ultimately enable impact at scale. When we talk about collaboration, we also need to look at the partnerships between buyers and suppliers. Addressing sensitive topics requires commitment, transparency, and trust. And this was facilitated by our long-term partnerships with our suppliers, some of which even span more than 10 years. Also, conducting a 1-year training program and ensuring lasting impact requires a long-term commitment. The next 3 learnings are about the operational realities of working in Tier 2 factories. So the project highlighted the importance of moving into the deeper supply chain, as some factories had never received training or been part of brand initiatives before, and formal grievance mechanisms were often missing. So the project marked an important step in building capacities and also for our due diligence work in Tier 2. At the same time, we learned that it's important to balance aspirations with what is realistically feasible on the ground. Small Tier 2 factories often operate with less labor-intensive processes, so extensive training programs can lead to significant production downtime. So after slightly adjusting the scope, we can say that 5 to 6 days of training for at least 10% of the workforce in each factory balanced effectiveness with operational feasibility and saw a strong engagement. Success also depends on active management commitment. In factories where the management clearly prioritized the project, participation rates were higher and implementation more effective. In one case, a factory even decided to take part in an additional training session. The next 2 aspects show how stakeholder engagement was implemented in the project. Early on, we aim to involve workers and managers in the training's design. We did this by means of baseline assessments and interviews. For the baseline assessments, we used the Atlas digital survey tool, which enables workers and managers to participate via smartphone. In total, we've reached about 45% of the workers and 84% of the managers with this approach. The interviews were conducted on site by CDI, and both ensured that the trainings were grounded in real factory needs. Stakeholder engagement also played a vital role for Atlas. In line with test runs and a user research study, worker feedback was integrated into the development. One of the most important outcomes also into the design was that the trainings helped to lower psychological barriers to speaking up early on in the development process. The challenge is not only the lack of formal grievance mechanisms, but the hesitation to use them. At the center of the design process. The trainings, workers, and management were brought together and encouraged to openly discuss challenges and concerns, and this laid important foundations for dialogue and trust between the parties. So while it is challenging to eliminate all barriers for workers, the trainings clearly help them to become less anxious and insecure in sharing their concerns and even voicing their opinions to their managers. And then we can move on to Robert's part.
Thank you, Natalie, for taking over the cultural shift. I'd also like to highlight that the cultural shift is one of the most important outcomes because it also helped to lower psychological barriers to speaking up. And that's where we also see that the trainings help to lower these social barriers, and while audits only provide a snapshot and listen to workers in maybe worker interviews, trainings work with workers to provide an unbiased insight and to provide channels to identify and address risks. So we also saw that high training engagement was present. So we had a strong factory buy-in. And in the end, we also exceeded the expectations in the final assessment, which means that we saw that the final assessment showed significant improvement compared to the baseline assessment regarding the scores in the assessment. Next slide, please. Yes. One problem we faced, which was also mentioned by Joshua earlier, is that complaints were not reachable for clarification regarding incoming complaints. That's something which we are also addressing in the follow-up, which I will present in the outlook later on. But we had a total number of 4 grievances throughout the project time. And in the end, we addressed these complaints on a broad level. So we talked to the factories, we tried to address these complaints like in a general way to talk about these issues, as these are payment terms, working hours, and potential labor law violations. But as we could not get in-depth details on this complaint and the complaints were not reachable for further clarification, which was needed to have a proper follow-up, we had to close the complaints in the system because of missing data. But we saw that the factories were nevertheless very responsive and very helpful, and also initiated some clarification statements in the factories to also maybe support workers in knowing why payment terms or payment schemes or payment timelines are paid in the way it is, and that this is in fact in line with legal regulations. That was one of the cases, for example. To sum this up, in the lessons learned from a brand perspective, we see that strategic collaboration is an important step to have multi-stakeholder initiatives and also to scale impact. We have the long-term partnership, which is very important, addressing the tier 2 void. We have a feasible training design and management engagement as well.
This is basically the second summary slide on the lessons learned from the brand perspective. Also a good opportunity to take a screenshot at this slide. And for the outlook.
So what we also wanted to address is a service offered by Atlas that we used during the project. So Atlas included the possibility to share assessments on the platform. This was highly relevant for us as brands because this way we could follow up on the trainings very well. CDI wrote their training reports after each training, so this was a way for us to monitor the data, to see how the trainings proceed, and yeah, this is a service that we valued very much. As I mentioned in the introduction, the project is already completed, but Deuter and ORTOVOX have agreed to continue the project or the collaboration with Atlas for another 12 months, ensuring that the external grievance mechanism stays active in the factories, and also to see the long-term effect of having such a system active in the factories. We also plan to do another follow-up survey within that year to see and measure the long-term effects of the training program. And the last aspect is again about stakeholder engagement. I think from all sides we've heard today that it was very relevant to have a multi-stakeholder approach and to engage with local partners for this project. CDI is already an expert at delivering training on grievance mechanisms and also on strengthening workers' rights. So yeah, we were very pleased with this cooperation and to have such culturally sensitive trainings delivered. And what we've also learned from this project is that trainings can give you a very deep insight into the factories. So what we've gained, or also gained from these trainings, are corrective action plans for each factory, which we can now follow up. So we gained a really good insight into the factories, and I think compared to an audit, it's a very great approach as well, which is less about control but more about collaboration, and yeah, can also help brands to address or see risks, potential risks in their supply chain. So maybe as a final note, collaboration across various stakeholders is crucial to create substantial impact and improve working conditions.
Perfect.
And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Natalie, for jumping in. What a nice way also to end the presentation. But this is definitely not the end of the session, because now we also have the possibility to answer your questions. So please write your questions in the chat and let us know what questions remain unanswered. I will also send you a little poll with questions from our side. So just to gather some data from our side, who is here and what interests you have. So I will start with the first question. Okay, recording will be shared later, yes. So the question from Kivok Yola. Do you know if the grievances in the internal factory level grievance mechanisms increased after the trainings? Would the tool allow for gender disaggregated data? So so from a tool side, I will definitely say yes. It offers it. We offer this gender disaggregated data, and from the internal grievance side, definitely also the number increased. So highly, right? Increased highly, I would say. Do you have any further comments to these questions, Natalie or other colleagues?
Not from my side.
Okay, then. What suggestions do you have for finding local NGO partners? Well, here I would first of all extend again also my gratitude, because the NGO partners was a very valuable part of the project. Natalie, do you want to maybe share about the process of finding the NGO partner?
So the way the multi-stakeholder initiative was built was by support of the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles. So this is how we connected with Care in Germany. And the way we found the Center for Development and Integration in Vietnam is by recommendation of the Fairway Foundation. What I think would be great is, or something we could address to the Partnership for Sustainable Textiles, is that they give more room or voice to organizations like CDI to present themselves, as they already bring together multi-stakeholders in many events and meetings. So this might be a good suggestion. I don't know if, Quan, you would like to add to this, how you get into contact with brands usually.
Yes, I think it's different depending on the activities. Sometimes the brands look for NGO partners as independently, and sometimes the partners like GIZ or PST, they kind of presented the project with the NGOs included that they have previous partnerships with. But I think it all depends on which project and which capacity building activities that you are looking to implement in which country. So for example, we have done a lot of work with Fairway Foundation. So these international NGOs, they have a really large networks of local NGOs to implement their activities at the local level. So these channels are usually the recommended channels to look for NGO as implementing partners.
Thanks so much, Quan, for elaborating. Then another question from Sarah Campidelli. Is the tool planned to be extended to other brands, expanded to other countries? Very quickly, yes, we already did that. Also, if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to us. Then I have a very interesting questions from Lorien. Did you start thinking about complementary upstream actions in order to increase risk prevention? Natalie, I would hand this question over to you, I guess.
Yes, I think it's also a great approach for risk prevention. Of course, it's very important for our due diligence work. So far, we've not planned to extend the project, but first of all, to complete the project following with the follow-up in the upcoming year. But I think it's definitely an approach that can be scaled not only within our supply chain in Vietnam, but also to supply chains in other countries, since Atlas is a tool that is scalable to all tiers of the supply chain and also other countries.
Couldn't agree more. Looking at the time, actually, we are already finished with the time, but as we also lost a bit of time with the technical difficulties, thanks so much also for bearing with us on this, but this can happen in a online side session. I guess everybody is aware of this. Maybe we can have one final question. And what kind of arguments do you use when interacting with factory managers to sensitize them to the importance of grievance mechanisms? So I have definitely also experience and answers on that, but Quan, here also your answer would really interest me. And in the meantime, I will also send up another poll where you can also find our email address if you have follow-up questions that were not answered here. Quan.
Okay, so the question is what I think it like ran away from me.
Again, the factory manager. So what kind of arguments do you use when interacting with the factory managers to sensitize the importance of grievance mechanisms?
So first of all, we have to provide awareness and initial knowledge on the importance of grievance mechanisms outside of the requirements and standards that they do have to meet. When it comes to audits, we show them what would happen if workers' concerns pile up and they go without channels to share their concerns and issues with, and they do not. If a factory does not have any internal grievance channels, then the system would have really negative impact because workers' issues are not addressed, and that would not only impact the workers themselves, right, but also impact their motivation. And workers' motivation and working environment are essential things when it comes to the operation of the entire factory. So if the workers are not motivated and they're unhappy with their working environment, then of course the production would be impacted. And I think that is one of the very important motivations for managers to take grievance mechanism seriously, as well as the other topics that we provided training on in this project. That's just like one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for elaborating, and I couldn't agree more. I think it was also so super valuable to have your perspective and also your local insight, but also neutral role in this context to facilitate this conversation. Natalie, do you want to add something on this question with the factory management?
Maybe from a different perspective as to how we approached the factories to participate in the training program, and I think that CDI's involvement was of high importance here. They have performed a kickoff to which we invited the factory management and also some worker representatives. So they introduced the project in the mother tongue and also from an expert's side. And I think this was very valuable in bringing the idea of the training program closer to the factories.
Thanks so much, Natalie. I think this. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was also very important for us from the beginning to stress that it's a project on collaboration and that there are no negative effects to be expected on the business relationship.
This is, I think, a perfect ending, something that we always like to highlight, right? This is strengthening workers' voices really can be seen as an investment. And because we are now already 5 minutes over time, I can see there are so many more questions, but I think we will not be able to answer them now. But we'll definitely get back to you. We will also share the recording and the slides again with you and your registered email addresses. So once again, thanks so much for participating. Thanks so much also from my side for our great speakers today. This project has really been highly valuable also from our perspective as service provider. And also thanks for bearing with us with the technical difficulties. And yeah, we hope to hear from you if you have any questions. And again, I will write in the chat also our email address from Atlat's side, where you can also contact us directly after the session, again, if question remained unanswered. We wish you a nice rest of the day, enjoy the further side sessions, and have a great start into the weekend.